you're dealing with right now.
Very excited about this one. Oh, yeah.
Let's go. Come on.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, he is I and I am him, Big J all day, a.k.a. the mighty Big J. And this is another edition of the Hype Show. Thank you so much for joining me again on this wonderful program. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like and subscribe to this video, comment as well, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Definitely appreciate it very much here. We're going to be talking about here tonight's Thursday night football matchup here. That's going to be between the Chicago Bears and the Washington Commanders. That's at 8:15 Eastern. That'll be taking place on Amazon Prime Video. We're also going to touch a little bit on the Jacksonville Jaguars and Buffalo Bills. That matchup is actually happening on Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, October the 8th. That game is taking place in London. That's going to be on the NFL Network. And then I'll let you know the rest of the Week 5 NFL matchups that'll be coming as well. And before we close out the program, we'll touch a little bit on the MLB playoffs. Everything got kind of sorted out yesterday with all the wild card matchups, and I'll let you know what those matchups are and what you can do going forward to look and see how those games are going to go. Baseball playoffs move really quickly, I've noticed. Like, they play their games still back-to-back, much like they do during the season. So we'll touch on that on the back end here to close out the program here. Thank you again for joining me, and let's get this thing rolling here. Again, tonight's matchup here for Thursday Night Football, that game is going to be between the Chicago Bears traveling to visit the Washington Commanders. The Chicago Bears sit at 0-4 after their loss just 4 days ago to the Denver Broncos, 31-28. And the Commanders, after a 2-0 start to their season, they've lost their last 2 games here. They got blown out by Buffalo in Week 3, 37-3. And just 4 days ago at Philadelphia in overtime, they took the loss 34-31. So the Commanders are 2-2, looking to bounce off of their 2-game losing streak here. And the Chicago Bears are looking to just get a win, period. They're 0-4. They're one of only 2 teams left in all of football that haven't won a game yet. The Bears and also the Carolina Panthers are 0-4 as well. Washington is favored by 6 to win this football game. I can definitely see why. Washington just flat out is the better team. Even they're a good-looking football team, in all honesty. I said this in the previous broadcast. Even though they've lost 2 games, I thought they played really well against Philadelphia, and they always play their divisional opponents tough, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Giants. And honestly, they're probably, this sounds like a slap in the face, but it's not. They are the 3rd best team in the NFC East. They're not as great as the Cowboys or the Eagles in how they've played so far, but they're definitely better than the New York Giants. They definitely haven't been an embarrassment by any means. That withstanding the Week 3 game withstanding, that was a blowout, like I said, but 3 or 4 weeks, they've looked good, and honestly, I think they're gonna get the win tonight. The Bears are a mess. If they fall to 0-5, I could see some major changes coming with somebody losing their job, Justin Fields getting benched, something. I honestly don't know what that change will be, but if the Chicago Bears lose this game, there's gonna be changes happening within that organization because again, the Broncos, they were up on the Broncos 28-7 at one point in the 3rd quarter, and they scored 21 points in the 2nd quarter to roar to that lead in the first place. And they just had the game until the 4th quarter. The Broncos just played some of their best football of the season to eke out that victory. I just don't understand a lot of the personnel changes and a lot of the coaching decisions that were made by Chicago, and that's what's been the problem here. It's not just the talent deficiency; it's the coaching deficiency as well against these other teams that's occurred. So I don't see Chicago winning this football game. It's on the road. They're 0-2 at home and 0-2 on the road, so that's not even really a factor. But I don't see them winning this football game here tonight. Washington, to me, if it was a situation where this is another thing I touched on in a previous broadcast as well. If it was a situation where Washington was in any other division, they would be leading the division, or they would probably be in 2nd place. Um, that's the team they are to me. They're very underrated as far as I'm concerned, but I take Washington to win this football game tonight. And looking ahead to to their whole 5-game slate, after tonight's game, they'll have another game in 10 days, October the 15th, and they'll be visiting the Atlanta Falcons at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The following week at the New York Giants, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 22nd on CBS. Then the following week, they'll be home against the Philadelphia Eagles in their second matchup of the season, October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then the following week on November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, they'll be at the New England Patriots. So, again, with the win tonight and then looking at their next few games at Atlanta and at the Giants, those also sound like W's to me because Atlanta is 2-2, but Washington is a better 2-2 team to me. I know the numbers are obviously the same across the board, but after watching Washington the last few weeks, I saw them up close and personal against Denver. And after watching the Giants in two primetime games, remember they started the season in a Sunday night game against Dallas, and they just had a Monday night football game against Seattle, and they were blown out in both games, 40-0 by the Cowboys and 27-3 to the Seahawks. So they're not a good team to me, and I can see Washington taking full advantage of them, even though it's on the road. So Washington has the potential to be at worst 3-2, possibly 4-1, because at the New England Patriots, they could steal that game too because they have the better offense and their defensive front is going to probably give Mac Jones problems. I've seen that in 3 or 4 games so far that Mac Jones, he's had to scramble a lot because his offensive line is kind of subpar. They're missing linemen. And at the same time, the defensive fronts that he's seen have been very they've been very pressurized and they've gotten after him here and made him have to throw the ball a lot sooner than he wanted to. So again, going back to Washington, I could see them being a 4-1 football team here over the course of these next 5 games, including tonight. The only thing, like I've said here, the only thing that affects Washington is their division. Because if they were in any other division, like if they were in the NFC South, for example, this is all geographical how these divisions are typically. I mean, the Cowboys being in the NFC East is kind of dumb, obviously, but if it was a situation where they were in any other division, my point being is that Washington could be a division leader in the mix for the division lead, but they're at best third because of the way their division is set up with the Cowboys and Eagles being superior teams at this point. On the flip side, as for the Bears, again, I feel like they'll lose this game tonight to fall to 0-5. And with 0-5, that's literally about a third of your season. I could see major changes happening as a result of that. And so Washington tonight, I could see them losing. This is their best chance to me to get a victory. One of their best chances. Because following tonight, in 10 days, they're home against the Minnesota Vikings 1 p.m. Eastern, October 15th on Fox. The following week, they're home again against the Las Vegas Raiders, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, October 22nd. The following week, it looks like for their Week 8 matchup here, they will be at the Los Angeles Chargers for Sunday Night Football, October 29th at 8:20 p.m. Eastern. Then the following week, they're at the New Orleans Saints, 1 p.m. Eastern on November 5th on CBS. So I got them losing tonight, excuse me. I picked Washington to win this game tonight. But looking at their next 4 games, if they can find a way to beat Minnesota and Las Vegas at home, at 2-5, I don't see the playoffs being a possibility, but it'll show me signs that they have something, that they're working with something, because we don't have that indication about this organization right now. There's a lot of changes that have happened, and there's still changes that need to be made. If it's a situation where they get the top pick in the draft again this year, the 2024 draft coming up next year, I do not see them trading that first round pick because they traded their first round pick this year because they thought they had their quarterback in Justin Field. The front office was convinced that they just needed more pieces around him. You add DJ Moore, you add draft picks for the next couple of drafts via the trade with the Carolina Panthers, but this team still doesn't seem to have a future. Whereas with Bryce Young, even though Carolina is also an 0-4 football team, as I mentioned, there's still a little bit of hope in that organization still with what Bryce Young can do. He's shown you signs of things, and they're still working on the pieces around him, whereas Chicago is just kind of a mess. So, like I said, I see them losing tonight to the Washington Commanders here on Thursday Night Football. Minnesota and Las Vegas, for now, I'm going to say those are losses unless they can show me something to indicate that they got it. At the Chargers, that's going to be a loss too because they're traveling to the West Coast for a primetime football game. I just don't see them keeping it close unless the Chargers just have some sort of more devastating injuries and they just don't play any good football. And then at the Saints, even Derek Carr is still the better quarterback. He's still kind of trying to get that offense going. They're only averaging, unfortunately, 15.5 points a game. The Saints, that's near the bottom of the league as far as offense. But their defense, that front seven that they have, is what's going to cause problems for Justin Fields and keep that offense in the game. I'll have an official prediction for that game as we get closer to it. But looking at the way things are shaping up for the Bears right now, it's pretty dicey. Again, after tonight, I see them being 0-5, and with those next 4 games I talked about, those 2 home games you got against Minnesota and Vegas, those are your best shots to win because going back on the road, against all the way across country against the Chargers, I see that being an L, and because of that Saints defense and how loud that crowd gets, I see that being an L as well. So, we'll prognosticate the schedule as we get further into it with the Bears, but it's not looking good for them. It's really not. I just look at them and I say to myself, "You're probably playing for a top pick," and I'm gonna keep reiterating that. You're playing for a top pick because if you get to a point where you're 0-5, 0-6, you're not making the playoffs. You're just not. So, what do you do from there? You play for draft position. That's what I would do if I was the Bears. So that's how that's gonna look for them. Again, the next game we're gonna talk about here, that's the early matchup here because that game will be on prior to typically when I broadcast on Sundays. That game is taking place 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, October the 8th, and that's an international game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Buffalo Bills. That'll be taking place at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. The Jaguars were at Wembley Stadium last week in their victory over the Falcons. So this will be their second straight game in London, and I think they stayed over there. That's probably the smartest thing to do. Obviously, you don't want to go through customs twice and find somewhere to stay, obviously. So they've been staying there basically all week and staying in England. So they've been getting accustomed to that time change. I know that's pretty rough on the body, obviously, and that's a very drastic time change. But they stayed over in England, and this is essentially a home. This is considered a home game for the Bills. But with the Jaguars being in London the prior week, they'll have an advantage to a certain extent with Buffalo just getting over there. I still see Buffalo winning this football game because they're flat out the better team. And the only game that they haven't looked that great to me was the first week against the Jets, and that was due to Josh Allen turning the ball over quite a bit. So as far as I'm concerned, I got them winning this football game. Tre'Davious White, unfortunately, he suffered an Achilles injury last week in their game, their victory last week to get them to 3-1 over the Miami Dolphins. And he's going to be out for the rest of the season with that injury. He's just flat out for the rest of the year. And that's a huge hit to their defense for sure. But I still got Buffalo winning this football game. Von Miller, he practiced in pads for the first time this week since he tore his ACL on Thanksgiving on the Thanksgiving Day game last year. And he's said he's looking to get back in, but they're just gonna kinda keep pace with him and see how he looks and just see how he feels prior to putting him in any game. So he's possibly gonna come off the PUP list. It's still not in stone if he's going to or not. But like I said, with Tre'Davious White missing the rest of the season after tearing that right Achilles tendon, that's gonna put a hit onto their defense. He's pretty much the heart and soul of that defense, and he definitely makes that secondary stick and makes them play the game the way that they need to. So again, I'm taking Buffalo to win this game, and we can look ahead to their games following Sunday's game. After their international game, they'll be back stateside for their home game, 6:20 Eastern, or I'm sorry, 8:20 Eastern, October 15th against the New York Giants. The following week after that, on October 22nd, they're at the New England Patriots, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS in a divisional matchup. Then they have a Thursday night football game, October 26th, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That'll be at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. The following week, 10 days later, they are at the Cincinnati Bengals, November 5th, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. That's going to be an interesting matchup here because we'll have to monitor Cincinnati down the stretch to see how they look. So far, they're having a rough go at it at 1-3. Joe Burrow hasn't looked like Joe Burrow, and he's definitely having a down year. So I'll be interested to see where Cincinnati is at by the time these two teams match up here week 10, because that game was basically being touted as a Titan, like a Titan, not like the Tennessee Titans, but a matchup between Titans, like the top teams in the AFC, and we'll have to see who's better. And based on where things are at right now, Buffalo could roll in that game. We'll just have to see as we get closer to it. But again, I'm taking Buffalo to win the international matchup Sunday morning, and I'm also taking them that following week against the Giants for sure, especially being at home. The New England matchup, I'm going to take them as well because New England as a whole, I just don't believe in that offense. That offense is not going to do much against that defense, even with Tre'Davious White out. And on top of that, Buffalo is going to make that game tough right off the bat with the way they score the football and with the way they're going to move down the field. So give me Buffalo to win that game. Even with the short turnaround, they're going to be home against Tampa that following Thursday, and I really think that atmosphere is going to be very electric. So give me Buffalo to win that football game, and then as the Cincinnati game as we get closer to that, we'll have a better idea of what Cincinnati is. But Buffalo could be at worst 4-1 over their next 5 games. I just don't see them losing any of these unless something wonky happens or something nuts happens or they have a key injury to a key player. Football's a week-to-week sport, as I just mentioned with Tre'Davious White going down. That isn't something that they obviously foresaw and knew was coming. That just happens with this game. So yeah, the Bills, that offense is chasing history. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, they connect really, really well and really, really often on that football field, and they thus haven't been stopped so far. This team is seventh in all of football as far as passing yards on average per game, and they're also eighth in the league as far as running the football. So they have a nice balanced attack that's in the top core of the league. So Buffalo's very scary on offense, and I just again don't see them losing this football game here. Jaguars, they got to prove to me that they're more consistent because, like I said, mentioning them prior, everybody in the NFC South is 2-2, and Houston is playing above their skis, and I think Indianapolis is too to a certain extent. While Tennessee has dropped off a bit as far as what they're playing, as far as as with expectations in place for them, with them bringing DeAndre Hopkins over. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, after winning this division last year and winning a playoff game, they're playing a bit below expectations as well. So the AFC South is wide open still at this current time here. And as teams play each other the next couple of weeks, we'll get a better idea of who's going to do what. With this loss, Jacksonville on Sunday morning would fall to 2-3 on the season. The following week, October 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, they're home against the Indianapolis Colts for that game. As I just mentioned here earlier, or actually the following week, I apologize. They're a Thursday night football game just 4 days later for their Week 7 matchup. They'll be at the New Orleans Saints, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, October 19th. That's on Amazon Prime. 10 days later, they're at the Pittsburgh Steelers, 1 p.m. Eastern, October 29th on CBS. Then they have their bye week that hits in Week 9. Then the following week, Week 10, off the bye week, they're home against the San Francisco 49ers, November the 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, this is the thing about their schedule. The 5 games I've mentioned, the first one here they're going to lose in Buffalo, and the one at the very end I just mentioned against the Niners, I can see them losing that football game. But the 3 games in the middle, to me, with this Jacksonville Jaguars team are a toss-up because home against the Colts, you've already won at the Colts. So I think home against the Colts could be a good game, but this is the caveat to that. The Jaguars are 1-2 at home. They've lost to the Chiefs and to the Texans, and their home game was a home game against the Atlanta Falcons, in theory, because the Atlanta Falcons fans traveled kind of well, and there was actually a lot of them for that game. But that game should have been a bigger blowout than the 23-7 to me. I just felt like their offense didn't click the way it should have. Um, Jacksonville, I could see them being 3-2, like I said, over these football games. But if there's any slippage as far as that offense or the team as a whole, they could be 2-3 because the Colts are going to have tape on them. The Colts have tape on the Jaguars naturally every year because they're divisional opponents. So I could see the Colts having tape on that last game and that first game. And at the same time, I think Anthony Richardson he'll be a bit wiser on how to play this team and as a whole with his game because he'll have more games under his belt. That was his very first game of his NFL career. So I could see the Indianapolis game being a toss-up, and then the Saints game on a Thursday night. The Thursday night game is very sneaky because you're just coming off of a game in a sense, and so once you get your mind right and finally get yourself off of the last opponent, you have a game right in your face as opposed to having that extra few days. So those games are very tricky as well, and with them having to travel on the road to New Orleans, it's not a distance issue; it's just a turnaround. So that game could be a very tricky game as well. The Pittsburgh Steelers game, I'm actually going to call that a victory on my end because the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got to fix things on the offensive side of the ball because they can't expect the defense to do everything as great as it is and then with the key pieces they have there. So that offense is going to need some work as far as the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I can see Jacksonville coming in and take that game just due to the simple fact that they're the more complete team than Jacksonville. So as I said, if it was a situation where they were to lose to Buffalo and San Francisco at the end of this next 5 game slate here, but still take Indianapolis, New Orleans, and Pittsburgh with the victories, that'll still have them at 3-2, and that would still put them at 5-4 through 9 games, with the bye week already under their belt. So, Jacksonville, well, again, we'll have to see. That division is very muddled, and there's not really a lot that I can speak on as far as who's going to do what. I initially said that it would be Jacksonville, but we'll just have to see because the other teams in there, they're going to be in the fight as well. Looking ahead to the rest of the games that are coming up here, you got the Atlanta Falcons. They're going to be hosting the Houston Texans at 1 p.m. Eastern. That game will be played on Fox in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Atlanta is favored by 1.5. That's basically a pick'em game. The game after that coming up, the Detroit Lions will be hosting the Carolina Panthers. That game is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. These games are all regional, so it just depends on where you are in the country as to what games you'll be getting. Or if you have the Sunday Ticket on YouTube, that's always great as well. Ford Field is where the game will be played in Detroit. Detroit is favored by 10 on that game, and I could definitely see them covering that. The Indianapolis Colts will be hosting the Tennessee Titans in an AFC South matchup. That game is going to be taking place at Lucas Oil Stadium. The Tennessee Titans are favored 2.5. In my opinion, I'm not a betting guy, but anytime I see anything that's like 2.5, 1.5, anything of that nature, that's a pick'em game, and that game could go either way. And as I was just discussing with the AFC South, I do feel like that game could go either way. We'll just have to see who the better team is. Another game coming up on that schedule at the 1 p.m. Eastern time will be the Miami Dolphins hosting the New York Giants. That'll be taking place at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The Dolphins are 3-1, and the Giants are 1-3. And Miami is favored by 12, which definitely that sounds about right. That's roughly if you get 2 touchdowns above, then you should be good if you're the Dolphins or you're betting on the Dolphins. The Patriots will be hosting the New Orleans Saints here. That's going to be taking place also at 1 p.m. Eastern at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. The Patriots are 1-3, and the Saints are 2-2. That game is picked as even in Vegas. So either way, you should be good to go as long as you pick the right team. The Ravens and Steelers. The Steelers will be hosting the Ravens in Pittsburgh here at Acrisure Stadium. I call it Heinz Field, but it's called Acrisure Stadium. But the company bought it apparently. But I call it Heinz Field. That's just what I'm used to. The Steelers are 2-2, and they'll be hosting the 3-1 Baltimore Ravens, who currently have the lead and are favored by 4.5 to win this game. Sounds about right here, and we'll have to see if the Steelers can bounce back on offense. It is believed that Kenny Pickett is suffering from a sprained MCL at this current time here, but it's actually considered a bone bruise, so it wasn't as bad as they thought it would, and it didn't affect the ligaments as much. So he's expected to play. We'll just have to see if he is available for that matchup. Kicking off the 4:05 p.m. slate games on Sunday here, the Rams will be hosting the Eagles. Los Angeles Rams are 2-2, while the Eagles are 4-0, one of 2 unbeaten teams left in the NFC and NFL as a whole. That game will be taking place at SoFi Stadium, and the Philadelphia Eagles are favored by 4.5 to win that game. So roughly a touchdown or more, possibly. Again, I'm not a betting man, but that line seems a bit low considering what Philly is and what Philly has done. So we'll see if they cover and then some, but I like Philly in that game. The Arizona Cardinals will be hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. Each team is 1-3 heading into this game and looking to improve. That'll take place at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Cincinnati is favored by 3 points to win that football game, which is roughly a field goal. I'm definitely curious to see how Joe Burrow looks. That calf issue has definitely been an issue as a whole, and they can't say that it's not. They can't say that it's not an issue, plain and simple, because he hasn't looked like the Joe Burrow that we've been accustomed to or have seen in previous years. So we're gonna have to double back and see how that's gonna work here. A game taking place, the one of 2 games taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. The Denver Broncos at 1-3 will be hosting the also 1-3 New York Jets. That game will be taking place at Empower Field at Mile High. Denver is favored by 2.5 in that game, so essentially that's a pick 'em. I had the Broncos winning this football game, but we'll have to see if Zach Wilson can improve on the way he played last week against the Chiefs. They took the L, but that's probably some of the best football that he's played in quite some time. So I'm very curious to see how the Jets look against the Broncos. The Broncos, they squeaked by since Chicago. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure that they can be anything long term. That beating the Bears and Jets isn't a measuring stick for success. Excuse me. It just means you were the better of 2 teams that day. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But I'm taking the Broncos to win that one. But the Jets, if they show anything, that'll be very encouraging. Also taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, the Minnesota Vikings will be hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. The Minnesota Vikings sitting at 1-3. The Chiefs are 3-1 and leading the AFC West. That game will be taking place at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Kansas City is favored by 3.5. That seems low as well. Kansas City hasn't been the same dynamic team that we're used to in previous years, but they've been winning their football games. The L that they took was by the 1 point. And honestly, Travis Kelsey could have made a difference if he did play. So we'll have to see. Minnesota winning that Carolina game doesn't really move me at all, and I can see Kansas City blowing this game up, and if they get going, especially inside of a dome. For Sunday Night Football here, this is the matchup that everybody is waiting on, and the matchup I am for sure waiting on here. This is the San Francisco 49ers at 4-0, hosting the 3-1 Dallas Cowboys. That game will be taking place at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, 6:20 or 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. That's the Sunday Night Football game. And yeah, this is going to be a shootout. I really hope this is a good game. I don't want to see a blowout with this game, especially with the teams involved. San Francisco again sits at 4-0 with Seattle at 3-1. The Los Angeles Rams are 2-2, and the Arizona Cardinals are 1-3. Those are the standings in the NFC West. And the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles lead that division at 4-0 with Dallas at 3-1. The Washington Commanders at 2-2 currently, and they'll be improving or declining on that record one way or another after tonight. And the New York Giants sitting at 1-3 at the bottom of that division. This game to me is going to come down to who has the best football in them and who makes the least amount of bad decisions. Brock Purdy, to me, he's having a phenomenal start to his career, but this is going to be probably the second big game that he's had a chance to play in. The NFC Championship would have been the first, but with him tearing that UCL at his elbow and not really being able to play in that game, I just don't really have the ability to honestly measure anything because he didn't play and he was injured. So this game is going to be huge. Dak Prescott, he's statistically speaking, he's 97 of 136 for 908 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Brock Purdy is 81 of 112, 1,019 yards to 5 touchdowns with no interceptions. The pieces around Brock Purdy are better to me than the pieces around Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's offense has the ability to do what they need to do and get off, but they haven't had to because the defense has played so well in 3 of their 4 games so far. That's what's put Dallas where they're at, and as far as their positioning and what's propelled them to being a 3-1 football team. As I stated back prior to Week 3 against the Arizona Cardinals, can Dak Prescott take the game over and win the game when the defense is not playing that well? This is a huge chance to prove that. Because as far as Dallas's defense, it's not going to be any cakewalk by any means because this will easily be the toughest offense that they've seen. The Giants, the Jets, I know the Cardinals beat them, but that's not something that you look at on paper and say, oh, that's a great defense because they don't have a Kyler Murray in there. And there's pieces that they don't have in place from last year. Zach Ertz is their leading receiver at tight end, and he's just coming off an ACL injury. So it doesn't scream success when you think about the Arizona Cardinals. So as far as Dallas, I mean, with the way that they rolled the Patriots between the Giants, the Jets, and Patriots, those teams don't scream cream of the crop. Those teams don't scream contender. This is your test right here. Where they go from there remains to be seen, but this is your test from here. And conversely, for the 49ers, this is also a test in a sense, too, because they played Arizona last week and they were able to get the victory. But in week 2, the Los Angeles Rams definitely gave them a game. The Rams definitely kept things close, and we discovered who Puka Nacua is for them as far as wide receiver. He's having a great start to his career. But the 49ers, either way, this is a litmus test for both teams because if the 49ers can punish Dallas and win this game head to head, that solidifies home field if these guys are to meet again down the road at some form, in some way, shape, or form, whether it be seeding of some kind in the divisional round or even the NFC Championship if Dallas can get there. So this is going to be a very interesting game here. I'm very curious to see what Dallas looks like as far as the team as a whole, specifically on offense. And with San Francisco, I'm very curious to see what they look like as a whole, specifically on offense as well. But I definitely want to see what that defense does as far as Dak Prescott. Could Dak Prescott make himself look good against that defense, or is he going to fold under that pressure and turn the ball over by any means? So that's going to be a great game. We're definitely going to talk about that more on Tuesday, and I'll give you all the highlights and how I feel about each team depending on the results of that. But the 49ers, like I said here, I got them winning this football game. I just don't see them losing. unless something catastrophic happens as far as how they play football, and the Dallas takes advantage of that. San Francisco gets favored by 4, so that makes sense. That's like a 31-27 football game, and I could see that happening. The last game to talk about on the docket for this week is actually the Monday Night Football matchup. The Las Vegas Raiders are hosting the Green Bay Packers. The Raiders are 1-3 with their first win coming in Week 1, having lost 3 since. And the Packers sit at 2-2. They'll be playing this game at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, with the Las Vegas Raiders favored by 1 point. That's basically what I would have them as well. Looking at this game, the Raiders just again haven't proven anything to me, and they were given that game by Denver. And the Packers, they've been very inconsistent. They've shown that they can blow a team out, and they've shown that they can blow a lead. They've shown that they can come back on teams. They've shown that they can let teams come back on them. They've had 4 very different games so far. Honestly, I could see the Packers winning this football game, even though Vegas is favored by 1. I could see the Packers winning this football game, and the main reason why is just the Raiders. If even if Jimmy Garoppolo is back, they're just not that great of a team to me. They're just not. They just don't see. I just don't see them as a contender. And I just don't see Josh McDaniels as that great of a coach either. He just doesn't have the ability to do things outside of New England. He proved that with the Denver Broncos earlier in his coaching career, and he's proving it again now. He just doesn't move me as a great coach. So I could see the Packers coming in and stealing that game. They have a bye week the following week, so that would be a great way to go into that. Speaking of bye weeks, the teams that are not playing this week, week 5, to kick off bye weeks are the Cleveland Browns, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is their bye week, and they don't have a game this week. They'll be resuming week 6. Bye weeks are great because it just depends on what time of the year you're in. But bye weeks are great, gives you time to heal and get that body kind of nice and at least to a decent spot for the following week. So kudos to those teams. But yeah, that's the NFL scheduling, the rest of the scheduling for the rest of the week coming up for week 5 here. I won't be broadcasting on Sunday. I'll actually be attending a game live, so I won't be able to broadcast that morning. But I'll be following up with all of these games for you, including tonight's matchup on Tuesday. My next broadcast will be on Tuesday. That'll be a little bit more extended, and we'll talk about all these games here. The final thing I want to touch on here before we wrap up tonight's broadcast here, we're actually going to switch gears and talk about baseball a bit here. The wild card matchups here, the National League Wild Card Series all took place this week, and they all concluded as of last night here. We're going to go through the scores here and then also talk about the matchups and what that looks like here. With yesterday's games here, again, all the series concluded with the Rangers, the Texas Rangers. They defeated the Tampa Bay Rays 7-1 to win that series 2-0. This is a best of each of these series are a best of 3 matchup, and it took place in the higher seeded city. So, for example, the Tampa Bay Rays were the higher seed here. They were the 4 seed in the American League. They didn't win a division, but they had the best record outside the team that did win a division. And they hosted the 5 seed Rangers, but the Rangers won both of those games in Texas 7-1. And as a result of that, they move on to the ALDS, and they'll be going toe to toe with the Baltimore Orioles. That series starts on Saturday, October 7th, and that game is at 1 p.m. Eastern. These games, I believe, this game is going to be on FS1. The American League Series games will be on FS1 and Fox. And the National League Series, each of those will be on TBS, in case you're viewing or looking for those games on TV as well here. The Minnesota Twins, they defeated the Blue Jays 2-0 yesterday to win their series 2-0. They were the host city and won both of their games at home. And as a result, they'll be moving on to face the Houston Astros. That series starts also on Saturday, October 7th. Game 1 will be on 4:45 p.m. Eastern. That game will be on FS1 following the Rangers-Orioles game. So that'll be pretty exciting if you're a fan of those teams. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they defeated the Milwaukee Brewers 5-2 to take both of those games in Milwaukee and win the series 2-0. Arizona, they looked good. They are the better team. They have a nice young team, and they just rolled on Milwaukee, and it's unfortunate. Their series will be getting started against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and that'll be kicking off at Dodger Stadium on Saturday, October 7th. That game will be at 9:20 p.m. Eastern on TBS. And the last game that we're going to talk about here that took place yesterday, the Philadelphia Phillies defeated the Miami Marlins 7-1 to win their series 2-0 as well.
and they'll be traveling to face the Atlanta Braves to kick off their NLDS series. That's also on Saturday, October 7th, and that game one will be at 6 p.m. Eastern on TBS. That game will precede the Diamondbacks Dodgers game. The Phillies and Braves met in the NLDS last year. Last year, the Atlanta Braves were the defending champions, and the Philadelphia Phillies said "C'est la vie" and made their run all the way to the World Series before being stopped by the Houston Astros. So that's going to be very interesting. But baseball is down to their final eight, their elite eight, so to speak. And if you're interested in baseball, there's games all day on Saturday. There's plenty of sports going on all day Saturday. There's plenty of college football to watch, plenty of games going on there. But with the baseball players, I'll definitely be discussing that more and more also as these broadcasts go on as well, and kind of get you acclimated and let you know the scores, the results, and who's going to be playing in the NLCS, the ALCS, and also what teams are going to be meeting up in the World Series once we get to that point too. So if you're a fan of baseball, I'll definitely be talking a little bit about that as well, and just kind of letting you know what's going on with those scores and with those series as well. So, but yeah, that'll wrap up today's broadcast here. We kind of went over the schedule of what's going to be coming up here tonight as far as the Bears and Commanders and all the games you can look forward to through the day and night on Sunday and the Monday Night Football game as well. As I said, I will not be broadcasting on Sunday because I'll be attending an NFL game live and in person, so I won't be able to broadcast that morning. But I will be available for you on Tuesday. We'll go over all the scores, all the highlights, who did what, update the standings, and just kind of make a proclamation of what teams are going to do and prognosticate and go from there. But thank you so much for joining this broadcast here. I appreciate it very much here. This is Big J All Day, and this is
And you already know
The
what
Hype
we're
Show.
doing right now.
Appreciate it. Thank you.